As soon as they came on, here comes Triple H. Huge pop, big cheers. Michael Cole is plugging the Paul Triple H Levesque era to explain that he's the chief content officer, and this EVP is actually over. The Triple H chants wouldn't hardly let him speak. And then he introed the WWE title match and revved the people up and welcomed them to SmackDown. And we had the pyro is back for the big event. And they were lowering the cage and they announced it's going to be the first 30 minutes commercial free for the world title, pin, submission, or escape the cage. Hate the escape part. And they went to a history package to explain Solo and Cody and how this match came about. And I mean, so far, again, it's like when a show I love, the UFC did when they debuted on Fox, 15 years ago. For a new viewer, they explained everything while at the same time it was a good show for the person that watches every week. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I don't know how many new viewers they would have, but for a new channel, there was nothing about it that felt like, oh, they're talking down to me to explain stuff I already know. I thought they did a good job explaining all the things that are happening, but it wasn't too much different than a normal SmackDown.
No, but they know how to format a fucking show. Is what it, and it just kept, boom, it looks big, and they've got 15,000 people in the building in Seattle. And everything is making sense, and it looks important. It was just refreshing.
What did you think of going with Cody Solo to start the show? And also, what did you think of the commercial-free aspect?
Well, it was perfect because breaks would have hurt this match because they had such a good match. And they did such a good job with everything. And if they'd have broken like normal, they would have hurt it because you get distracted. But this is instead of just having a normal show and going commercial-free for an hour, half an hour, whatever, if it's a big match, they hook the people. And, it's the weekend, so the numbers aren't out yet. But we ought to do the ratings next week. Just to see what the fuck, because I can't believe they would have certainly not lost anybody. And they probably gained people over the course of the first 2 or 3 quarters. I'm writing down now to do the ratings next week.
All right.
But anyway, as Solo and Cody, huge pop. They sang his song. Whoa! The whole 9 yards. They did the big match in-ring introductions. Alicia Taylor is not Samantha Irvin, is she? She looks like she stuck her finger in a light socket. Is that a choice, or was she scared by something?
Well, that's her look. Why don't you leave her alone? She hasn't done anything wrong to you yet.
Well, yet, see? You could always expect it. And then they had a good match. And the thing is, instead of going back and forth or play-by-play on, what the match was, it just observations, besides the fact they're doing long audio mutes. I have a feeling people are chanting, you fucked up, or holy shit, or whatever.
I don't know about that. That's what I was wondering, because they were really long, longer than usual on Fox, but there also wasn't any chant that you heard going into it or coming out of it that would have, you didn't hear the word fuck at all or anything.
You think it's a new person on the button that's not used to wrestling?
I don't know. But it happened twice, I think, on this show, right?
I said no, several times.
Oh, okay.
More than twice. But anyway, the match, it was good because Cody is a genius at selling and the pained expression and the gasping. And then he'll fire up and do his shit and give the people hope, and then he'll get cut off again. And that was the story through the match as they built to the big things every once in a while. Cody hit a cutter off a cage and got a 2 count. That type of thing, but they would sell these things in between, and they would react to things, and it was somewhat logical. Either, okay, now they're trying to escape and climb out, or now they're trying to go through the door, or whatever the case, and Solo would stay on him long enough that he had to fight from underneath, and they kept it fresh. They still did the big stuff, off the top or off the... At one point, Remember we were talking about Bryce Remsburg and the count on the AEW show? Here was an example. Cody went to the top of the cage and did a cross body on Solo, and when Solo caught him right, but he was coming from such a height, the momentum, when they went down, Solo's head bounced off the fucking mat. And he grabbed the back of it, and you could tell he rung his bell. And that was a cover, and the referee, 1, 2, and Solo didn't kick out, but he raised his arm enough. And it was like, oh, shit. You know, that's one of those things. If you get your bell rung like that, you can't keep track of a count in an arena, 15,000 people screaming. So that was a close one. But, they did that, and Cody bled just enough, not like a stuck hog. And finally, they built up to it. Cody was crawling for the door. Solo slammed the door on his head, went for the spike, but Cody foiled that and hit the crossroads 1, 2, 3. And that was a great cage match right there. But then they're going to the angle. But your thoughts on the match first, because I want to say something about Solo in a second.
I thought the match was really good. I think the things that they did, you mentioned there was another one where Cody landed like the top of his shoulders / neck.
Yes.
And it just, oof, because of anything you do in the cage or off the cage, it's not like doing it off the top rope. The height changes the trajectory and it changes the way you have to land. It's almost like if someone dives on you, you have to jump out just to be able to take a flat back bump when you catch them.
And that's why it ain't that easy. And the thing with Solo is, as you'll know when we talk about the angle here in a second, Solo is not a cool heel because Solo is, I hate to say this, it's going to sound like I'm knocking him. Solo's not an impressive enough worker to be a cool heel. But Solo has gotten good enough for this spot because the people, they put him in a spot where he's tried to take Roman Reigns' place, and the people, he has heat because of that with the fans. If he was doing the Jacob Fatu stuff, it would be too much. Solo can get by and he can be a heel, but he's not so impressive that you start falling in love with him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the thing with Jacob is you need somebody that does all that impressive shit, but he's the enforcer. He's the guy that's under Solo's thumb, so to speak. And that way he can do all that shit. You can put his shit over like $1 million because at some point, as we've talked about, Jacob will look at Solo and say, no. And then you got something there, but Solo, to carry the heat as the top guy, he shouldn't be too good. And it's perfect. But anyway, at that point, here came the Tonga twins and Fatu, and they climbed the cage. And as Cody's waiting on him, Solo comes up and spikes Cody. And then they get heat on Cody, and they're beating him up, and they set him up for Jacob, who does that triple jump moonsault flawlessly. And then he's going to the top of the cage, and suddenly music hits, and it's Roman Reigns, and the people go batshit. And Roman comes down to the cage, all meaningful and menacing. And he gets in and pulls the door shut, and the people pop because he's closing himself up with the whole bloodline. But did you notice when Jacob was on the top of the cage and Roman got in, apparently Jacob got to the floor because Jacob was not in the cage when Roman was in the cage.
Yeah, they never show you him climb down. And I did have a second before Roman came in. I'm like, oh my God, are they going to already have Jacob Fatu do a move off the top of the cage? Because he'll do it. He's crazy. But is now the time? And then Roman came out at the perfect time, but you needed some sort of explanation for Jacob not being on top of the cage anymore.
Well, and the thing is, Jacob did not confront Roman physically. Roman gets in the cage, closes the door. Solo runs into he starts kicking ass on the Tongas first, right? And then Solo stopped him a bit, but then Solo was running at him and ran into a Superman punch. And Jacob's on the floor, and as Roman and Solo looks like Roman's going to get him, Jacob jerks Solo's feet out from under him and pulls him out the door. So as the enforcer, he's also the bodyguard. He went down to the floor so that he could get Solo out of harm's way. But then Roman calls Jacob Fatu in, just like motions, like, come on. And they do a face-off. And that's another one of the long audio mutes. I don't know what the fuck. But then Solo jerks Jacob by the feet and pulls him out the goddamn door. And the Tongas jump on Roman, and they start getting heat on him, but Cody comes up and saves Roman. And then Roman and Cody turn to each other with tense looks, and no affection or handshaking or whatever, just looking at each other. And I'm like, what a fucking angle. And we were 37 minutes in the show, and you didn't get tired of it. Because there was something going on with no commercials. So, I mean, I loved the first segment here.
I love that Jacob and Roman did the exact same thing. They got in the cage and they closed the door right behind them with their one hand.
Yeah.
And then you never got it. And you still won it. And this set up the rest of the show, everything with Cody and Roman, but great opening to the show. I mean, how could you open any hotter?
And if it had been the other guys, they would have given you so much of it, you never wanted to see it again. Anyway.
I was afraid Cody was going for that moonsault off the top of the cage again like he did in AEW.
So when he was climbing that one time, I thought, and boy, but see, that's a risk that they can't afford to take. Imagine how much money would be lost if Cody hurt himself doing something like that.
That's what I was afraid of with a lot of the stuff in this match because of the height of the cage, especially. I mean, if you think about that blue cage, I know it was a pain to work with, but the height was perfect in a lot of ways. Big Boss Man took the superplex off the top of that thing. This thing's so big. And again, there's little room for error, and Cody right now cannot go down. I was surprised they did some of the stuff they did.
Bubba had called me after that. It was Saturday night's main event, right? Bubba and Boss Man, or Boss Man and Hogan.
They did house shows, and then it ended with the Saturday night's main event match.
Well, he called me after that one because he said, you see the superplex? They had been doing that in most of the house shows. He talked Hogan into it, but the thing is, he was most proud of it because he was making $12,000 a week going around the loop with Hogan. So he was happy to take that one superplex off even on those old hard rings. But so that was 1988. We just talked about 1989.
May of 89.
Sorry there, Kreskin, the amazing Kreskin. But $3 to $1 for 1983, so almost $3. So he was making like $30-something thousand a week, the equivalent of today, going around with Hogan at those house shows.
And if you remember, I mean, it says a lot about how the Boss Man was used and how well he did in his role. That was like one of the better performing Hogan house show runs, surprisingly, him and the Boss Man.
Yeah. Well, because Bubba could work and he was big enough that he could be believable against Hogan, and he actually got Hogan to get up off his ass every once in a while because he could take such bumps. Hogan loved to give them to him.